You're listening to the Everything Jewish 10 Minutes at a Time podcast, where you'll learn about every Jewish topic imaginable in about 10 minutes. Quick disclaimer before we start. My Hebrew pronunciation isn't always perfect. Why? Because my voice isn't really a voice. It's generated by AI. So if I mangle Eov, the Hebrew name for Job, please forgive me. Think of it like that friend who always butchers the menu at a kosher deli but still gets the matzo ball soup. Today's topic is the Book of Job. Now, this isn't the kind of job you put on a resume. It's a deep, sometimes dark, sometimes beautiful book of the Hebrew Bible. We're diving into one of the most philosophical stories in Jewish tradition, a book that dares to ask the big question, why do bad things happen to good people? Honestly, if you've ever stubbed your toe on Shabbat morning and thought, why, God, why? You've already started your own mini Book of Job. Let's explore this ancient masterpiece together. The Book of Job opens in Uz, a mysterious land not clearly pinned down on any ancient GPS. Job is introduced as a man of incredible wealth, huge family, and flawless righteousness. He's got 7 sons, 3 daughters, thousands of sheep, camels, oxen, and donkeys. Basically the Jeff Bezos of the ancient Near East, but with more goats. Job's life looks perfect. He's the type of person everyone envies on Instagram. Family vacations, smiling selfies, and flawless Tash-blessed captions. But here's the twist. In the heavenly realm, there's a conversation between God and the Satan. In Hebrew, Satan isn't yet the red-horned devil of later imagination. It literally means the accuser, or the adversary. Think of him as God's prosecuting attorney, poking holes in humanity's record. He challenges God, saying, Job only worships you because you've spoiled him with good stuff. Take it all away, and he'll curse you to your face. And so begins a cosmic test, one that will strip Job of almost everything he has. In quick, brutal succession, Job loses everything. Raiders steal his livestock, fire consumes his sheep, enemies slaughter his servants, and then, in the most crushing blow, a wind collapses the house where his children are feasting, killing them all. It's tragedy layered on tragedy, like binge-watching a season of This Is Us, but with more sandstorms and fewer tissues. Job's response? Shockingly calm at first. He tears his clothes, shaves his head, and falls to the ground in worship, saying, The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. It's one of the most famous lines in the whole Bible. You might expect the story to end here with a gold star for Job's patience. But no, things get worse. Satan strikes again, this time covering Job with painful sores from head to toe. Imagine itching, burning boils all over your body. Ancient skincare nightmare. Job sits in ashes, scraping himself with broken pottery. His wife, watching this horror show, bluntly tells him, curse God and die. Ouch. Enter Job's friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar. They hear about his suffering and come to comfort him. At first, they do the best thing possible. They sit in silence for 7 days and 7 nights. Sometimes words fail, and just being there is the real comfort. But then, like guests who overstay their welcome, they start talking, and talking, and talking. The Book of Job is essentially a long series of speeches, debates, and rebuttals, kind of like a never-ending group chat where no one knows when to stop typing. Job insists he's innocent. He hasn't sinned enough to deserve this tsunami of suffering. His friends, however, keep insisting otherwise. They argue that suffering must be punishment for wrongdoing, classic blame the victim theology. To them, the math is simple. Good equals reward. Bad deeds, punishment. Job's misfortune, they reason, must be his fault. Job, understandably, doesn't buy it. Instead, he cries out for justice and demands an explanation from God himself. And this sets up the central drama of the book. The speeches roll on like a marathon podcast you didn't mean to binge. Eliphaz appeals to visions and tradition, urging Job to repent. Bildad drops proverbs about the wicked always being punished. Zophar comes in hot, basically telling Job he deserves even worse. Not exactly great bedside manner. Job, however, refuses to back down. He laments bitterly, curses the day he was born, and even accuses God of being unfair. He wants his day in court, a cosmic trial where he can plead his case. What's striking is Job's honesty. He doesn't settle for polite prayers. He shouts, protests, and demands answers. In a way, Job becomes the ultimate model of authentic faith, not silent submission, but raw, painful honesty. Later, a younger voice named Elihu joins in, offering yet another explanation. But by this point, the reader might feel like yelling, "Enough already!" Still, the debates serve an important role. They show how humans wrestle with suffering, offering every theory except the one Job really wants, God's own explanation. Finally, God shows up, out of a whirlwind like no less. Talk about dramatic entrance. You'd expect God to deliver a neat TED Talk on the problem of evil, but that's not what happens. Instead, God overwhelms Job with questions. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Can you command the morning? Do you give the horse its strength? Did you create the Leviathan? It's less, here's the answer, and more, look at the vastness of creation you don't understand. Some readers find this frustrating. Job asked for justice, not a nature documentary. But others see it as profound. God doesn't trivialize Job's pain, but instead reminds him that the universe is bigger, more mysterious, and more interconnected than human logic can grasp. The whirlwind speech flips the script. Job isn't given reasons, but perspective. The takeaway? Humans may never fully comprehend divine justice, but faith means trusting in something beyond our limited view. Job's response is surprisingly humble. He doesn't get a direct answer, but he bows to the mystery. He admits that he spoke of things too wonderful for him to know. In the ancient world, this isn't seen as defeat, but as spiritual growth. Job has moved from secondhand faith to firsthand encounter. He's not just hearing about God, he's experienced God. And in that, his suffering is transformed, not erased, but reframed. The ending, however, brings another twist. God rebukes Job's friends for misrepresenting divine justice and praises Job for speaking honestly. Yes, you heard that right. Job, the one who shouted, complained, and questioned, is called righteous for his honesty, while his friends, who tried to defend God with pious cliches, are scolded. That's a powerful message. God values real dialogue over fake politeness. In the end, Job's fortunes are restored. He gets more wealth, more children, and lives a long life. But the scars remain, reminding us that suffering always leaves its mark. The book of Job has sparked endless debates among rabbis, philosophers, and theologians. Is it history, parable, allegory? Many see it as wisdom literature, a kind of biblical thought experiment. Unlike other biblical books that explain suffering as punishment or a test, Job dares to leave the question open. It shows that simplistic answers don't cut it. In Jewish tradition, Job is often read alongside Ecclesiastes and Lamentations as texts that confront the darker side of life. Job's cries echo through Jewish history, especially in times of persecution and exile. For many, Job represents the voice of the Holocaust survivor, the pogrom victim, the refugee, people who ask why and don't get a clear answer. And yet, Job's persistence in dialogue with God keeps the relationship alive. It's not blind faith, but engaged, questioning faith. That tension between protest and trust is at the heart of Jewish spirituality. Job's influence goes beyond Judaism. Christians, Muslims, and secular philosophers have wrestled with his story. In Christianity, Job is seen as foreshadowing Christ's suffering. In Islam, Ayub, Job, is remembered for patience and perseverance. Philosophers like Kierkegaard, Camus, and even modern authors like Harold Kushner in When Bad Things Happen to Good People all circle back to Job's central question. The book refuses easy answers, which is exactly why it continues to resonate. In a world where we crave certainty, Job reminds us that some mysteries remain unsolved. The book's power lies in its honesty. It tells us it's okay to cry out, to protest, even to yell at God. Far from being blasphemy, that honesty is honored. That's why Job continues to matter in synagogue study groups, college classrooms, and even late-night dorm room debates. If you've ever questioned life's fairness, you've already joined Job's conversation, whether you realized it or not. So, what's the final takeaway? The book of Job isn't a neat chicken soup for the soul story with a bow on top. It's more like a raw, unedited podcast where the big questions spill out uncensored. It reminds us that faith doesn't mean never doubting. It means wrestling honestly with doubt. Job teaches that sometimes the most faithful prayer isn't thank you, but why? He shows us that God can handle our toughest questions, and that relationship with the divine isn't about fake smiles, it's about authenticity. In the end, Job leaves us with mystery, but also with hope. Suffering is real, but so is God's presence in the whirlwind. Next time you find yourself asking, why me? Remember, you're in good company. Job asked first, and he asked it loud. And maybe, just maybe, the courage to ask is itself an act of faith. Thanks for listening to Everything Jewish 10 minutes at a time. Join me next time as we tackle another fascinating Jewish topic.